Question number 20. Validation rule. An administrator has been asked to create a validation rule to ensure legal check is mandatory for new customers being created and having annual revenue greater than 10K. What two functions should the administrator use when creating validation rule? We have four options: error message location, error condition formula, rule create date, user assignment. So the intent of this question is to test if you know the validation rules, if we know the validation rules in Salesforce, how do you create it and what kind of configuration that we can do in a validation rule. As the name suggests, validation rule helps us to validate whether the data being entered by the user is in a proper format or based on a business logic, whether the data entered by the user is appropriate or not. So that's validation rule in a nutshell is all about. Let's try to create a validation rule and then see what functions does it offer, and then we'll come back to the answers and pick the right one. So yeah, I have a simple account, a customer account. So basically we are storing a shoe customer. This is built for a shoe customer, this entire application. And as you can just see, we have something called store annual revenue, and we have a legal checkbox, right? So when I create, or when I just let's say give a store revenue as 2K, $2,000, right, and then have this legal check selected, let's say save. So there is a error condition. There is an error on the screen, right? That the save did not happen. So the point is, as per business process, when the store revenue is less than a certain amount, the legal check is not mandatory. It clearly says that the legal check is mandatory or needed only if the store revenue is greater than 10K, isn't it? So this is a classic example of validation rule. So there is a business process, for which we wanted to put a simple automation or a validation rule, in place that ensures that the data is, intact or appropriate when it is created, when it is entered on the page. So let's see how this is done. I go to this setup, edit object, and right here we have validation rules. Yeah, so let's try to create one, or yeah, let's just try to pick the same validation rule. Good. So when you create a validation rule, certainly, right, you will give a name to the rule, and then you give a condition or a formula basically that validates your data. In our case, you did say that if the store revenue was less than 10,000, right? And the legal check is selected, this is the error condition. If this is true, then I have an option to throw an error message. And also I have an option to dictate, where I would like to see that error message. Is it next to that field or on the top of the page. So right here, I've just configured it to I've configured the message location to show next to the field. That's the reason you just see it right here. Otherwise, you don't see this message, right here. Instead, you'll just see the message only in the pop-up on top of the page. Yeah. So now let's go back and then see the answers. So which two functions, should an administrator can use? Of course, error message location, right? So either you can just show the error message next to the field or on the top of the page. You will also able to find that option when you try to create, let's edit this one. Yeah, this is the one I was just talking about. Error location. Right now, this is configured to show next to the field, but there is an option to configure top of the page as well. But this function is available, right, when we configure validation rule. So option A is correct. Error condition formula, yes, that is pretty much important, right? Because this is the condition that helps us to validate whether the data being entered by the user is correct or not. Correct. So error condition formula is also the next function. So the right option is option A and B. What about option C and D? Rule create date. Of course, there is no such thing called rule create date right here. Yeah. So there is a rule name, but there is no such thing called rule created. So option C is incorrect. User assignment, no, because validation rules, are generic, right? So to validate the data being entered on the page. So there is nothing called user assignment in validation rule. So the right option to this question is option A and